Johnny Sports Network here to provide you with my Week 14 NFL predictions. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving, a great weekend. I hope you got some great deals on Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Although I do think that I offer the best deals every week, I provide you my picks, and all that I charge is time. I also always interact with the commenters. Last week was a very strong week despite not a good start. 11-5 in the moments leading up to the Packers and the Lions. I switched from the Lions to the Packers, and I'm relieved I did that because that was the one Thanksgiving Day game that I was not sure about. I was back and forth on it leading up into the game. And that was one of the few things that I was correct about on Thanksgiving Day. The Packers covering and winning outright. The Bengals covering the 7 points. And the Bears covering the 7 points against the Eagles. But I did not pick either of those two teams to win outright. I also picked the Texans and the Jets to win outright as underdogs. I had the Panthers covering the 10.5. As soon as I saw that the Rams and Panthers was in the early window, I knew that it was a excellent value to take the points with the Panthers as the West Coast team traveling on the road to play in the early window. More often than not, it's a trap game for the West Coast team. And we are approaching crunch time in the NFL season. 5 weeks remain in the regular season. The margin for error gets smaller and smaller as the season winds down. What does Week 14 have in store for us? We have the Cowboys and Lions on Thursday night. We have the Bengals and the Bills, with Joe Burrow with one full game back into action. We have the Colts and the Jaguars, a major AFC South matchup. We also have the Steelers and the Ravens. We have the Bears and the Packers, Texans and Chiefs on Sunday Night Football, and Week 14 concludes with the Eagles and the Chargers on Monday Night Football. Without further ado, let's get to the Week 14 NFL predictions right here on the Johnny Sports Network. As always, we begin with Thursday Night Football. This week, we have the Cowboys and the Lions. Both teams playing on Thanksgiving Day last week. The Cowboys winning against the Chiefs. Lions losing to the Packers. No advantage for either side as far as extra rest is concerned. However, the slight advantage for the Lions is they don't have to travel. I do think this is the Lions' third consecutive game at home. These teams, they are trending in opposite directions. The Cowboys, they've won 3 in a row, while the Lions, they've lost 4 of their last 7. It's unknown on the status of Lions wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown. For the Cowboys, George Pickens, second in the NFL in receiving yards, only behind Jackson Smith and Jigba. As of a couple of hours ago, Amon-Ra St. Brown's status is up in the air. And Sam Laporta is already out for the season. So the Lions, they're going to be potentially, well, they're definitely going to be missing Sam Laporta, but adding Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Lions, they could be down 2 of their biggest offensive pieces. Plus, the Cowboys' run defense has been strong in these last 3 weeks, which could be trouble for the Lions' running game. I have been back and forth on this game ever since Thanksgiving night. I do think it's going to be high scoring either way, but I'm going to go with the Lions. And if I change my mind, I will either comment it in the comment section, I'll pin the comment, or I'll make a YouTube shorts about it. But this game, I'd say 52% to 48% leaning toward the Lions. It's that close, for me at least. Seahawks and Falcons, another matchup where the teams are trending in opposite directions. The Seahawks, in a very competitive NFC West, trending up. They've won 9 of their last 11 games. The Falcons, they are trending down. They've lost 6 of their last 7 games. Yes, they have lost 6 of their last 7 games. For the Falcons, wide receiver Drake London, he's missed the last couple of games. It's possible he could return this week. For the Seahawks, Jackson Smith and Jigba, still leading the NFL in receiving yards. The Seahawks are one of 4 teams this week who are favored by more than 7 points. It's the Seahawks, Buccaneers, Broncos, and Rams, all favored by more than 7 points. I do think out of those 4, I think at the very least one of them is not going to cover. 2, I think, is a possibility, but I think 1 is a guarantee. And I think the Seahawks are a prime candidate to be the one that does not cover. Based off of recent history with the Falcons, the closer they get to out of playoff contention or out of playoff contention completely, the Falcons, they tend to surprise everyone. I think this could be one of those games. I think the Seahawks win, but I think for some reason the Falcons getting closer to out of playoff contention, I think they cover 7.5. Bengals and the Bills. The Bengals with a dominant win on Thanksgiving night on the road against the Ravens in the return of Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow missing the last couple of months with turf toe. And the Bengals, they all of a sudden have momentum and confidence with Joe Burrow returning. Despite the Bengals being last in the NFL in total defense, dominant performance against the Ravens on Thanksgiving night. While the Bills, they had a nice response against the Steelers on the road. A dominant second half for the Bills. Even though the Bills are at home for this matchup, there's been a discussion on, do the Bills just struggle against teams that are in playoff contention, but they're not in the playoff contention? Teams that are on the playoff bubble. We saw them have a miserable loss against the Dolphins on the road. We saw the Bills lose against the Texans on the road on Thursday Night Football, where the Bills' offensive line gave up 8 or 9 sacks in that game. I am anticipating a high-scoring game in this game because, in all honesty, it's what the people want. Joe Burrow and Josh Allen, 2 of the best quarterbacks in the NFL against each other. I'll be surprised if this isn't a high-scoring game. I think the Bills win, but I think the Bengals, they once again cover this week. This feels like a game where it's high-scoring, and the Bills only win by 3 or 4 points. But I'm leaning towards the Bills winning by 3. Titans and Browns. The Titans still looking for their second win of the season. their one win of the year essentially handed to them by the Cardinals, while the Browns last week losing to the 49ers. It was a game where the Browns, they had momentum, they were staying in it, until they go for it on fourth and less than a yard from their own 33-yard line. The tight end lines up under center, and he fumbles the snap. And then at that point, all the momentum the Browns had in that game, it completely vanished. And I don't know if there is a pick this week that feels like a good pick, but could it be too good to be true? Because the Browns, they're second in the NFL in total defense. They only give up 271.3 yards a game. Myles Garrett leads the NFL in sacks with 19 on the season. While the Titans, they have allowed 48 sacks this season, the most in the NFL. I don't think there's been an official announcement, but I think we can be under the assumption Shedeur Sanders will start at quarterback once again this week, which would be an opportunity for him, a good opportunity for him to have a good performance against a one-win Titans team. I am going to pick the Browns reluctantly. I'm going to reluctantly pick the Browns to win this game. I'm reluctant about it because this does feel a little bit too good to be true, but I still think they get the win. Commanders and Vikings. To be completely truthful, this feels like a game where I simply have to pick someone to win. This game can honestly go either way, and it's between two teams that I can't really trust. Even though we did see the Commanders give a valiant effort against the Broncos on Sunday Night Football last week, they still didn't win the game. While the Vikings, they lost 26-0 to the Seahawks last week with Max Brosmer at quarterback. But there is no quarterback questions for the Vikings at quarterback this week, as J.J. McCarthy is set to return. For the Commanders, Jaden Daniels has not been cleared for contact yet, but it's still a possibility he could play in this game. It's uncertain if we're going to have Jaden Daniels versus J.J. McCarthy or Marcus Mariota and J.J. McCarthy. But I'm going to lean towards the Vikings in this game, and it's not by much. It's probably 53% to 47% Vikings. Only because the Commanders lost the Broncos in overtime. I find that a deflating loss for the Commanders. And even though J.J. McCarthy has not put up the most exciting numbers this season, I just think he's due for a big game at some point, and it could come this week. In a game that is nearly close to a coin flip, I'm going to go with the Vikings. Dolphins and Jets, both teams, they have some momentum from these last handful of weeks. The Dolphins have won 4 of their last 5 games, and the Jets, they've won 3 of their last 5 games. And despite how disappointing the season has gone for these two teams, both of these teams, they are in a position to finish the season strong. When we saw this matchup earlier in the season in Miami, the Jets, they made it a competitive game. They just got in their own way. And that was one of several instances where the Jets, they've gotten in their own way this season. And I've said it time and time again throughout the season, the Jets are a much better team than what their record shows. I have said in several instances before that I can't trust the Jets to win a game, and I said that I could never pick the Jets until they can show me they can win a game. The last 2 times I have picked the Jets, they have won, including last week against the Falcons. And I'm going to pick the Jets to once again pull off another upset, because the big element for me in this game, the Dolphins struggling in cold weather, below 40 degrees. I don't have the exact statistic on it, but I think the Dolphins have lost 13 of their last 14 games when it's below 40 degrees at kickoff, and the projected temperature at kickoff is 38 degrees. Now, that being said, I'm going to pick the Jets to pull off the upset. Saints and Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield ended up playing last week, as his status was in question when he was injured against the Rams the week before. The Buccaneers, they also got some good news this week, as it's possible Mike Evans could return to practice this week. Right now, the Buccaneers, they are competing against the Panthers for the NFC South. Chris Godwin is also starting to get back into rhythm. He had 78 yards and 3 receptions in last week's win against the Cardinals. While the Saints, they did everything they could against the Dolphins. They had a chance at an onside kick, but the ball did not travel 10 yards. And as much as I have talked about not having much expectations for the Saints this season, they've been competitive in some games. I am going to pick the Buccaneers, though. I do think the Buccaneers, they win by at least 2 touchdowns. As much as I am concerned about the Buccaneers being one of the 4 teams this week favored by more than 7 points, I do think they win by more than 9. Colts and Jaguars. About 3-4 weeks ago, it looked like the Colts were going to run away with the AFC South and perhaps be the number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs. But the Colts, they are not trending in the right direction. They've lost 3 of their last 4 games. Running back Jonathan Taylor, he does lead the NFL in rushing yards. But these next 2 pieces of information is not something you want to hear if you're the Colts, or in the Colts fan base, or if you're picking the Colts to win this game. The Jaguars, they lead the NFL in rushing defense. And even more of a concerning piece of information, if you're the Colts, a fan of the Colts, someone picking the Colts to win this game. The Jaguars, they've won 10 in a row against the Colts when the game is in Jacksonville. In these last handful of weeks, the Colts, they have seen their lead in the AFC South slip away. And now they're going on the road to a place they have not won in 10 straight games. With that being said, I'm going to pick the Jaguars to pull off the upset in this game. Also, we did see Sauce Gardner get injured last week. I do think that is another difference in this game as well, as the Jaguars make it 11 in a row against the Colts in Jacksonville. Up next, we have the John DuPay Bowl, the Steelers and the Ravens. Both teams are looking to respond to losses last week. The Steelers losing to the Bills. The Bills, they ran for the most yards against the Steelers defense in team history. How does the Steelers defense respond going against Derrick Henry this week. The Ravens' dominant loss to the Bengals on Thanksgiving night. The Ravens, they do have the extra rest factor, playing on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to all recover from that loss on Thanksgiving night. And this game is in Baltimore. The last two games that were played in Baltimore, the Ravens won by 17 points and 14 points. Despite the fact that more often than not between these two teams, the game is a close game. But with recent history and with the Ravens having the extra rest factor, I think the Ravens, they win by at least 7 points. I've talked time and time again how the Steelers' defense is either a top defense in the league or a complete liability. I think the Steelers' run defense will be a little better this week, which may not say much considering last week was the most rushing yards they've given up in a single game in franchise history. But I think the Ravens, they win by more than a touchdown. Broncos and Raiders. The Broncos once again last week, playing it close, playing down to their competition. The Commanders, they got a touchdown in overtime, decided to go for two, but the pass was deflected, and the Broncos, a survive and advance win by one single point. This week, the Broncos, they go on the road against the Raiders. In Week 10, between these two teams in Denver, the Broncos won 10-7. I expressed recently that the Raiders, at this point, they need to start Kenny Pickett because how much worse could it get for the Raiders as far as their quarterback situation is concerned? Early on in the season, it was talked about the Raiders, they could be a playoff caliber team because of how a vast majority of their games are in domes, and Geno Smith does good in dome games. I haven't looked at his exact stats, but I have a feeling he's thrown more interceptions than touchdowns this season. The Raiders, they've allowed 46 sacks this season, second most in the NFL, while the Broncos lead the NFL in sacks this season. I'm going with the Broncos, but the question is, are they going to cover 7.5? Even though they have struggled to cover this season, I do think they do this week. I think they're due for a dominant game, and I think this game is a candidate to do so. But either way, the Broncos win outright. Bears and Packers in Lambeau. 4 weeks ago, if you were to ask me what my thoughts were on this game, I would say the Bears are going to win, even though this is in Lambeau. And this is despite the fact that both teams, they are trending in a very good direction. Bears have won 9 of their last 10, lead the NFL in turnover margin. Dominant win against the Eagles on the road on Black Friday. The Packers, they've won 6 of their last 8 games, but they have struggled in a lot of them offensively. There's been moments this season where the Packers, they have struggled offensively, but they have covered in back-to-back weeks for the first time since weeks 1 and 2. The Packers not being able to cover in games, that's been a big talking point for me in recent weeks. But these last couple of weeks, the Packers with a dominant win against the Vikings and a big win on the road against the Lions on Thanksgiving Day. And Jordan Love had a phenomenal game on Thanksgiving. I do like the momentum that the Packers offense is on. I am going to pick the Packers to win this game. However, are they going to win by 7 or more? I'm not sure about that as of this moment, because in this kind of matchup with both teams trending in the right direction, and I feel like, to me, with both these teams trending in the right direction, I think 6.5 points is a little suspicious. You'll have to get back to me later in the week. But I do like the Packers to win this game outright, though. Rams and Cardinals. The Cardinals, they had a valiant effort against the Buccaneers, but ultimately they did not get the win. While the Rams, they are looking to respond after being upset by the Panthers when they were 10.5 point favorites. In the last couple of weeks, the Rams, they've emerged as Super Bowl favorites. I do remember when the Rams won the Super Bowl a couple years ago. They lost some games that they weren't necessarily expected to lose. And maybe the Rams losing last week was maybe history trying to tell us something. Maybe it was a fluke with a West Coast team traveling cross country to play in the early window. That is the exact reason why I have the Seahawks not covering against the Falcons this week. Because the Seahawks, they're a West Coast team traveling across the country in the early window. And with the Rams, we have another one of those teams favored by more than 7 points this week. I said of the 4 teams, I do think at least one of them's not going to cover this week. 2 could be a possibility. I am picking the Rams to win this game. However, the Cardinals this season, they have surprisingly covered against some of the stronger teams in the league. With it being a divisional game, the Rams coming off of a very surprising defeat, at least to them, I think the Cardinals, they keep this game close, and I think there's value with the points on the Cardinals side. Rams win, but I think the Cardinals surprisingly cover. Sunday night football, Texans and Chiefs. Both teams currently on the outside looking in the playoff race. Texans are 8th, Chiefs are 10th. Perhaps the season is on the line for both of these teams. I would say more towards the Chiefs, their season is on the line than the Texans. Because looking at the remaining schedule for these two teams, even though they have common opponents coming up, a difference for me is the Chiefs had to play the Broncos on Christmas night. They've already lost to the Broncos. Texans play the Colts in Week 18 at home, and we saw them defeat the Colts last week. The Texans leading the NFL in total defense. The defense for the Texans has been a major difference maker in these last couple of games against the Bills and the Colts. But as far as this game, even though it's been a disappointing season for the Chiefs, you can even make the argument it's been disappointing for the Texans as well. But the Texans, they've been dealing with C.J. Stroud being out for a handful of games. I just think with the Chiefs at home, when their season is going to be on the line each and every week for these final 5 weeks. Plus, even though I find the Texans the better team in this matchup, like I did with the Lions a couple of weeks back when they were on the road going against the Chiefs, and I saw the Lions were underdogs, despite me thinking they're the better team, the Chiefs, they ended up winning by 2 possessions. And I think that this could happen as well. I don't think it's going to be a 2-possession game, but I think the Chiefs, they do win this matchup. Even though I do think the Texans are the better team, I just think the Chiefs being at home, season on the line, I think they get it done. Week 14 concludes with Monday Night Football, Eagles and Chargers. The Eagles, they have been struggling as of late. It looked like the Eagles were going to run away with the NFC East 3 weeks ago, but they lost the Cowboys after leading 21-0 and then losing at home against the Bears on Black Friday. And their offense struggled to generate points against the Packers and the Lions. I'm not panicking on the Eagles yet. Even if the Eagles lose this game, 3 of their final 4 games, they are very winnable. The Raiders at home next week, and then 2 games against the Commanders, a struggling Commanders team that's been riddled with injuries all season long. The Chargers did get some good news this week, as it was announced that Omarion Hampton, he could be activated off the IR this week, and he could play on Monday night. As far as this game is concerned, I do think it's 50-50 for me. I know that I said a moment ago that I'm not panicking about the Eagles yet, but if the Cowboys win this week and the Eagles lose on Monday night, the Cowboys, they're all of a sudden right back in it. In fact, the Cowboys, they're probably already right back in the NFC East race. Even though it has been noticed that I picked the Eagles to win a lot, I'm going to pick them to win this game reluctantly, because I feel like at least this week or next week against the Raiders has to be the get-right game for the Eagles, because they have a major matchup on the road against the Bills a couple of days after Christmas. But is this going to be the get-right week game? Well, is this week going to be the get-right game for the Eagles? I do think if it's not this week, then it will be next week against the Raiders. But either way, I think the Eagles, they win next week regardless of the results of Monday night. And that will do it for my Week 14 NFL predictions. Comment your predictions down below. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. My college football picks for Conference Championship Week, they're uploaded. My takeaways from college football and the NFL from this past week will be uploaded on YouTube Shorts later in the week. Thank you for tuning in today and throughout the entire season. Your support means everything to me. Enjoy the games this week. I hope to see you back here next week, as we are approaching the finish line in the NFL playoff race. We're getting into crunch time. Just 5 weeks left in the regular season, and the margin for error is getting smaller and smaller as this season winds down. Until next time, Vegas is always watching.